Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. Yesterday, President Trump met with Bukele, the president of El Salvador, and he had a very simple message, one that I think is amazingly refreshing in the American context. He was just talking about how you have this situation where so many people get angry at guys like Bukele or Trump for putting criminals in jail, but jailing criminals is actually liberating for the population. Without law and order, without the application of law, without knowing that the government is there, the state is there to step in on your behalf and stop those that deserve to be stopped, you can't really be free in a meaningful sense. And as we look at a court system and Democrats that are trying to bring back an illegal immigrant who's allegedly a member of MS-13, as we watch an alleged killer who, again, allegedly stabbed a young man in Texas, collect a large amount of money, move into a new home, get a new car, get rewarded in many ways, it seems, for the actions it took, it's really striking the level of just a lack of rule of law and a lack of real freedom that our citizens get to experience. Is almost as if the things that we have to do to control the criminals that have been allowed to roam the United States have turned it in many ways into an open air prison. Joining me today to talk about that is my buddy Kevin Dolan. He runs the Exit Group. Kevin, thanks for coming on.
Great to be here, man. Thanks.
Recently, you guys put on NatalCon, and a big success. Sounds like you made some waves yet again in the mainstream press. You want to give a little bit of an after actionable report for people who are unfamiliar with what went on?
Yeah, so we had about twice as many people as last year. We had a lot of mainstream academics talk about, the contours of the issue in a way that, last year we were focused on, hey, this is a problem. Like, everybody, like, pay attention to this, pay attention to the consequences of this that are very easy to quantify. And this year we were talking about, like, all right, what is actually causing this and what can we do about it, which is substantially trickier. If you sort of ask people naively, why aren't you having kids? Why didn't you have kids? The answers they give are not particularly, like, useful from a policy perspective. So drilling down to, like, what is the fundamental reason that people are rejecting or unable to fulfill this, like, basic natural imperative is a deep question. So we had a lot of really, really good perspectives on that. And yeah, we had media, like, beating down our door, which was crazy. And, CNN covered it in a way that I thought was actually, like, fairly objective and sympathetic. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. NPR was less nice, but yeah, it was a really, really good time. And I think I was sort of willing to hazard people being a little bit nasty about this thing that I was doing to get the word out. And I think so far it seems like it's succeeding.
Well, I'm glad to see it succeed. I'm glad to see it grow. I think there are a lot of new organizations, conferences, people on our side getting together to solve big issues in a way that was just not acceptable a few years ago. And you guys are touching on an issue that is weirdly polarizing, despite being something you would assume everyone would want to get on board with. Hey, people want to have kids. They're having trouble having kids. We should probably figure out how we can let these people have families. That should be pretty much the most politically neutral, pro-general American policy or conference one could have. And so the fact that, and I think in some ways it does appeal across the aisle in this way, but the fact that maybe you're getting some slightly more favorable coverage might mean that the needle could be moving a little bit on that.
I think that's what's causing some people to be more favorable to it, and it's what's causing some people to bristle at it, because it is kind of an unanswerable critique of the whole architecture of Western liberalism. It's basically saying, like, it doesn't matter that you've solved these other problems or feel like you've solved these other problems, because you're failing to solve the fundamental problem, which is, how do people raise families, and how do you make sure that young people like each other and want to be around each other and want to build together and can trust each other. And in failing to do that, all the other stuff collapses anyway. And so I think there are some people who are temperamentally and politically liberal who look at that and go like, oh, maybe we should actually re-examine some things. And there are some who basically say like, you know, threat detected, like their HUD goes red and they panic because they see it as a threat to like everything that they think was achieved and every battle they think was won since like 1950. So yeah, it's been really interesting to watch the variety of the media response.
Well, it's, again, one of those scenarios where the true test of any civilization is its ability to replicate itself, right? Like dead societies have no principles. And so you have this moment where people have to look at that. And, you know, I've had this discussion with people who are like kind of pro-feminism, and they'll say, oh, well, you know, we've resolved this issue and that issue, and generations of women will not have this problem in these Western countries anymore. It's like, first, which generations of women? Because you're not making any more. But second, because you're not making anymore, actually, no, it's going to be the people who are reproducing. It's the civilizations that are continuing who will decide. So yes, you've gotten rid of gender imbalance in the United States or in the UK. Congratulations. All of the Muslims moving in don't care. And, they will not care about your gender balance, and they will not seek to solve that problem. And so by solving the problem, you have almost guaranteed its continuation, because the civilization that solved it will eradicate itself.
Absolutely. I was actually having a conversation with Mother Jones about this, and they were asking me if I was a eugenicist because I talked about the fact that these systems that don't replicate themselves will be replaced. And what I said to them was like, and this is what I believe, I actually don't want to see the libs eradicated. I think libs do really interesting creative work. Like I miss when libs like made movies and music, and it was good. And I'd like for them to like stop destroying society and like get back to that stuff. And so yeah, it's if you care about anything, if you care about art or civilization or science or the survival of the human species, or going to other planets or going to Mars, like I think that's what Elon cares about. And like it's sort of a backdoor to caring about this, because he's smart enough to think about it from first principles and go like, oh, well, if we don't have the people who do this, then it's not going to happen. And that's true of everything.
Well, like I said, I'm glad to see that in a way you're getting more positive coverage. You guys are building momentum. You're getting a lot more people at the conference. And we'll be diving into our main show topic today, right after we hear from today's sponsor. Hey, everybody. This episode of the Auron MacIntyre Show is proudly sponsored by Consumers Research. You've heard about Larry Fink and BlackRock and ESG and all the ways that they're ruining your life, making grocery stores more expensive, making video games more woke. Well, Consumers Research has spent the last 5 years making Larry's life hell, and they're just getting started. Their work and its consequences have been profiled in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and most recently, Fox Business reporter Charlie Gasparino wrote a whole chapter in his book, Go Woke, Go Broke, on how effective they've been at dismantling BlackRock's ESG patronage scheme. He's making Larry Fink lose that last bit of hair on his balding head, and you should follow Will's work on X so you can laugh along with him. His handle is at WILLHILD. So give him a follow. Again, that's at WILLHILD on X. All right, Kevin, I just wanted to play this really quickly so people have an understanding of the context here. I apologize in advance. Bukele, despite being the most dangerous dictator in the world, is very soft-spoken most of the time, but I think you can probably make it out.
We're very happy, and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it. And we actually turned the murder capital of the world, that was the journalists call it, right? Murder capital of the world, into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, sometimes they say that we imprisoned thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like, it's
very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
we're very happy.
It's very hard not to like Trump. right? Like,
I-
that's that is the most human moment of like, that's great branding. I wish I'd come up with that branding.
Yeah, well, and Bukele, you mentioned him being soft spoken. He's like, I understand you have a crime problem. It's just a perfect quote. Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm listening to this, and I'm just thinking to myself, what an amazing moment that we've come to, where we need a lesson on basic things like, if you don't stop crime, you're actually victimizing the rest of the population. By imprisoning people who deserve to be in prison, you are liberating the rest of the population from the effects of rampant crime. And that should be a pretty obvious thing. But as we watch the Democrats battle to bring back alleged gangbangers, as we watch alleged murderers get rewarded by GoFundMe, and they get to buy new houses and new cars and these kind of things, it seems kind of wild that we live in this moment that even after Donald Trump's election, ultimately we're still looking at a reality where law and order still seems to be very hard for many people to obtain across the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, Trump, I'm glad he's there, but he actually doesn't determine, Karmelo Anthony's bail. And he doesn't determine, like, there's this deep layers of bureaucracy that have been established over decades. And personnel is policy. The guy who was standing next to Karmelo Anthony, talking about, he's home in their $900,000 house they just got with the funds. That guy, I found out, had shaken a baby so that its brain and eyeballs bled, and he did 8 days in jail because of I believe it was a Denton County judge, which that's actually coincidentally the county I was born in. And so it's remarkable to see what justice looks like there now. And yeah, it's if you don't know that you'll be safe walking down the street, and obviously, like, I think people like you and I would prefer that the state was not wholly responsible for our personal security, but given the consequences for exercising your right to self-defense in a lot of these jurisdictions, it's like, not only is the state not going to protect you, they're also not going to let you protect yourself, which your audience will be very familiar with the concept of anarcho-tyranny. The idea that the people who are easiest to control and the easiest to coerce are the law-abiding, and so they get it. They get the coercion, and yeah, you look around at like a CVS or a Target in the Bay Area, and like everything's under like plastic and bulletproof glass and all this stuff, and it's like walking into a prison commissary because they've had to make the entire world around them robust to the continual presence of criminals who won't be punished.
Yeah, and that really is something that I think is just weighing on everybody more and more. We talk about the loss of a high trust society, and a large amount of it is we have introduced multiculturalism. We no longer have a shared understanding of traditions or folkways or customs, religion, the things that would inform our daily interactions and allow us to cooperate in a way that we can trust each other. We can participate in society without having a large degree of barriers between us and the consequences of what other people do. But another big aspect of that is the criminal element, as you're pointing out. Democrats in general, the left, but even some on the right, have really resigned themselves to the idea that the population is just going to do what it's going to do, right? That, well, maybe we've shifted things demographically, maybe we've broken down social fabric, maybe we've made it so it's almost impossible to incarcerate anyone for any lengthy amount of time on serious issues, even though we pretend like we have an over-incarceration problem. We talk about this stuff and as if it's just unsolvable. There's no way. We've lost the technology to have a society in which you don't have to put everything behind glass. You don't have to lock down or zip tie or padlock every freezer at a convenience store. They're pretty simple things. I spent my entire life, when I was a kid, what area was really, really bad if they had to put the soda machine in the cage, right? Like if you have to put it in soda jail, Like that's how you knew that things were bad and you were in a bad part of the neighborhood. Now everything is soda jail. Now everything, and you can't walk into even chains that were specifically designed, like Target, to kind of be upscale, to be above a certain element, to create a scenario in which you're going to drive the prices, and the venues are going to drive out some of the people who are going to create crime, create a lack of safety, create intimidation that are going to keep shoppers from interacting. You now find them dealing with this issue, them having to lock all of their products behind things. It's harder and harder for the average person to find a neighborhood where they don't have to worry about soda jail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you have to understand that, like, I think the impression that a lot of people get is that this is like, and I think you've had this conversation with like putting the woke away, but like, I think a lot of people get the impression this is like an ideological fever, and that it's just the result of a lot of people having some bad ideas, and those ideas are a fad, and eventually they'll realize how broken it is, it'll pass. But actually, the mechanisms that generate these incentives, that incentivize people to release criminals and incentivize people to lock things up rather than securing space, that these are matters of federal law. I mean, like these are things that essentially the Constitution was overridden and replaced in 1964 by this massively egalitarian system of rule, whereby anything that might reveal distinction, anything that might land differently on one group than on another group, is unacceptable. And of course, every law and every standard you can apply lands differently on different groups, and so you basically can't have standards at all. And that's the world we're living in. And I think it is appropriate to make noise and get mad at the politicians about this. But I think we as individuals, as families, as communities, need to start building for this situation, building for things as they are. And that's what I'm about at Exit. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I saw you just came out with a piece. I didn't have time to read it all before we went live, but talking about how the Brazilification of America is enshrined in the law, that it's unavoidable due to the way that our law is structured. And that's something, if you listen to this show, you might have had hints of that. You may have grasped kind of that is part of the barrier that we're facing. But I think it's really critical for people to understand that even when someone like Donald Trump is in office, right, which is still a positive, like I am glad that Donald Trump is in office. This is a much better outcome. We have a possibility to win victories in areas that I did not think we would be able to win them before. But ultimately, the gradient of our system, the trajectory remains the same. And when I look at guys like Chris Rufo, who I like and whose work I admire, but he continues to say things like, we're going to use the civil rights law to fix this problem, right? Like, we're just going to civil rights harder. Like this time we're really going to actually apply the civil rights law, and we're not going to have this carve out, for white people where they don't get protected, that kind of thing. And it's just hard to see, because even when I had a discussion with Chris on the show about this topic, it was difficult. He's like, well, if there's differences between communities, then they, one will just have to do better. Right. Like, and it was like, dude, that is, that's some powerful 1990s talk radio conservatism there. But
that is not civil rights law.
Right. That is just not how civil rights law works. And also, Chris, I need you to sit in a room with a representative of these minority communities that you are talking about. I need you to look them in the eye and tell them, you're failing, do better. I gotta see that, like, because that's the political situation that you're telling me is going to occur, is that you're going to look like the representative, the collective representative of these communities in the eye and be like, don't suck. And then go back to running a meritocratic society. And they just won't notice if all the people of color disappear from Harvard and the New York Times and all these institutions where they've been installed by the Civil Rights Act. And I'm just not buying that outcome, man. I want it, but I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I'm the type of radical, insane, immoral monster who thinks that most people are trying their best, and that's not going to fly. I think you, but I think you can characterize the sort of right approach to this situation and the wrong approach to the situation in terms of like good Rufo and evil Rufo. So yeah, evil Rufo is like let's civil rights harder, and let's tell the public school teachers who are overwhelmingly left wing by political affiliation. Let's tell them they're not allowed to do critical race theory. Let's tell them they're not allowed to say gay during classroom instruction. And one of the things you notice is they'll be like, well, this placard is not a flag, and so I can have an LGBT placard if it's not a flag. Like these are postmodernists. Like getting around like the rules is what they dislike, the water they swim in. They know exactly how to do that all day long. And so that's evil Rufo, right? Good Rufo is let's just give all these MAGA homeschool moms money to send their kids where they want to send them.
Yes.
Like, let's just smash that power base, make it irrelevant, let people choose. That's good Rufo, and that's very good Rufo. We love Rufo for that.
Yes.
And so like that, I think, and that's, you could almost analogize that to like every part of the system. It is not about like making Fortune 500 companies treat, us fairly. They're not going to. Like, you're not going to boycott, out coerce companies that are subject to like the most elaborate apparatus of coercion ever devised by man. Like, you're not going to beat that. What you can do is you can build a life that is outside that. You can build a life that is not subject to like where they don't get to decide whether or not you eat, right? And that's that I think is the right approach. And so like in terms of policy, like why is Trump good? Why is Rufo good? Why is having all this political machinery good? How could you deploy it? I think you deploy it toward the dismantling of these people's ability to decide. And you take the resources that they've captured and you return them to the people. And so school choice is a good example of that. I think reindustrialization is a good example of that. Making it possible for smart guys. This is a project that I'm working on now with the Exit guys. Buying up these businesses that the boomers are retiring from and they're getting out of, and that need automation, that need process improvements, that need to be scaled better. Like getting into those games and getting sovereignty that way, owning the means of production, so to speak. That's how you secure sovereignty. It's not by demanding that the system treat you better. It's about getting your own thing, getting your own piece.
Yeah, and that's that's something Curtis Yarvin talks a lot about, right? That's very subject behavior. I need you to respect me. I need you to give me a chance. Please, oh sovereign, won't you let me have my moment? Yeah, that is behavior of people who are going to be ruled. And you're petitioning a sovereign power that is aimed against you in kind of the civil rights architecture. And it's again so hard for people to grasp this even to this point. I hope, like I said, I would love for Chris Rufo to like make the CRA work correctly, right? But my impulse is that having an institutions whose job it is to be the thought police in every interpersonal and professional and public interaction across the United States 24/7, that's always going to work against me, even if it changes up its mission statement slightly. Like, I think the existence of that apparatus is the actual problem, not just the fact that it's currently being misused in this moment.
Right. I mean, the purpose of the apparatus is to eradicate distinction, and it eats by finding new distinctions that it can interpose itself in and try to equalize. Like that's how it grows. It wants to grow. Obviously I'm being a little bit metaphorical there, but the incentives are for these systems to expand and to consume. And so, the idea that you're going to make that more totalizing and more all-consuming, and that it will thereby become more just, I think is insane. And that is essentially what what liberals argue for is they say like, well, the reason that these distinctions haven't actually been equalized yet, despite 60 years of trying, is that the rot is just so deep and so insidious, and you don't even know that you're hateful, but you are deep inside. And so we need to root down deeper and deeper inside of you to find the Hitler particles and get them out of you. And it's like, that's just not what's driving this. And the fact that assumption is wrong is actually like an infinite power source, because the problem never gets solved. And so you can always justify deeper and deeper and deeper interventions until there's just not one stone left on top of another. And that's sort of where we're headed.
Yeah, this is the bio-Leninism argument, right? There's an infinite amount of political energy in natural differences because you can't overcome them. Natural hierarchies aren't going anywhere no matter how radical you get. And so there will always be this differentiation, which means there will always be some kind of political animus towards those that are benefiting from the natural hierarchy. And therefore, there's always a explanation as to why you need to conquer more and more territory. And this inability to grasp that the populations that you import, the populations that you favor matter. It doesn't even just happen in the United States. Obviously, the UK is constantly in a more desperate situation somehow even than the United States. Yeah. God bless them. And right now, their most recent thing was that they barely stopped an explicit ruling that would force courts to give harsher sentences to white men specifically, which was an amazing moment. Like even they were like, "Ooh, that's kind of a bad look. Maybe like we can't go that South Africa yet." Like, but these are people who have banned. The joke in the United States has always been, "Oh, ha, ha, you guys don't have guns. What are you going to ban next? Knives?" And the answer was yes. Like literally, we have to ban ninja swords because the ninjas are everywhere. You got to, ninjas could be anywhere. And so you've got to get rid of this, and it just becomes absurd because you recognize that as absurd as that example is, it really is just a microcosm of everything about kind of the open air prison mentality. We are not going to stop bringing in people we know do violence. We're not going to stop stripping away the police efforts and the sentencing and things that would actually disincentivize these people. We're not going to deport any of the people who aren't supposed to be here or who we know are violent, but we are going to take away ninja swords. And that way, everybody doesn't have access to these weapons and we'll all be safer. It's just delusional, but it continues to be the solution no matter how absurd it gets.
Yeah. And I think what has happened is that the state's effort to expand has sort of outstripped the external threat. Like there's not a clear external threat to like the UK that they can justify themselves around. And so the threat has to be internal. It's keeping you safe from each other. And the way that liberalism works is basically liberalism's job as an ideology is to shave off all the particularities that make people fight so that they can collaborate on bigger and bigger, larger and larger scale production, basically, because that was sort of the technological incentive was to build these massive hyperscaled states. And so you needed as many people as possible getting along as much as you possibly could have. And so, you got to shave off religion and you got to shave off languages barrier. And you got to shave off eventually, like we're getting to the point where it's like, well, we have to shave off men and women and we have to shave off, your kids actually shouldn't matter to you more than anybody else's kids. And it's this complete eradication of all distinction and all identity, which then, this is like a lot of the doomers, a lot of like the black pill guys will be like, it's just going to be endless, fake and gay forever and ever because that entropy gradient never stops. But where I think it stops is that the reasons that people raise families, the reasons that people fight wars, and the reasons that people invest for the future are all based on those particularities. Like those are the things that give meaning to those sacrifices. That's why people do them. And so they have succeeded in making people harmless to one another, but in so doing, they've taken out basically the reason to live. And so, basically either people are rejecting that structure, they're rejecting the eradication of their particularities, which is what I hope people will do, or they're embracing it and going extinct. And that's sort of the reckoning that all of Western liberalism is coming to.
What do you think about the Democratic plan here trying to fight the deportations of illegal gang members? I mean, you've got, was it Kilmar Garcia is this guy's name? He keeps getting described as a Maryland man. A Maryland man has been
a Marylander.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Orioles?
Comes many generations of Garcias buried in the hills of Maryland. Many the long history there, ties to the land. It's very strange. It's this guy who very obviously is. It feels like they couldn't have picked a worse target. This guy is a resident of El Salvador, so their arguments against deporting people to El Salvador don't work with him because he's actually from El Salvador. Whether or not he is a gangbanger, allegedly, the judge seems to think so because part of the reason he couldn't get deported was that other gangs would threaten his life. So that's a little bit of a hint there that perhaps he might be involved in some activity that would put him in a gang affiliation. On top of this, it just came out. Apparently, Andy Ngo is reporting that his wife filed domestic violence charges against this guy. So, all around keeper. I just got to say, Kyle Rittenhouse shoots into a crowd of Democrats, hits a couple pedophiles and a wife abuser. Your chances are pretty high, right? Like, so it's just amazing that Democrats have built their strategy around this. On one hand, I think there is some traction for Democrats on the idea that rule of law is in danger. And I think they can probably spin that narrative up. On the other hand, the examples they're picking are so horrific that I'm only seeing people mainly in support of Donald Trump. I mean, you always have the who is it? It's not Scott Alexander. Who was it that did the two movies on the same screen example?
Oh yeah,
the Dilbert guy. I can't remember his name.
Adams.
Thank you, Scott Adams. Yeah, that is probably his greatest contribution to the political conversation. You do have that going on where you have Democrats and Republicans both looking at this event, and he's an innocent Maryland man, a father who loves his country, whichever country that might be, and then you have the Republicans, obviously, who are against this. But I think overall, I think that the optics are bad for the Democrats on this defense.
Yeah, and I suspect that what's happening. So number one, they've got him. They've also got this gay hairdresser who I guess had tattoos, and they were like, this guy. A gay hairdresser couldn't possibly be gang affiliated or associated with the drug trade, which, that's a little bit silly. But they do have more sympathetic targets. And I almost think that this is probing. It's like, how much power do we still have over this system?
Mm-hmm.
What can we, and I think both sides are doing that. I think what is happening right now is the expectation of law and order has collapsed on both sides. And so everybody's trying to figure out what they can actually still do. Like, if they command, who will obey? And that's a really dangerous situation because it means people are probably keeping lists and thinking through what they'll do when they're back in charge. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like point deer, make horse. There's an element of exercising control over people by requiring them to assent to ridiculous propositions. And yeah, this test of what does the rule of law mean to people now? Because I don't think that's clear to anybody. Certainly not clear to me.
Yeah, I was actually talking about this, funny enough, on Dinesh D'Souza earlier today, saying that exactly that I think the very concept of the rule of law has disintegrated, especially in a moment where you have Donald Trump. He's the elected president of the United States. He's acting under the authority of Article 2 of the Constitution. You have a judge. His entire job is to adjudicate disagreements about the law, but to uphold the law, uphold the Constitution together. And it's very clear that the judge is actively working against the law. Like, he's actively working to violate the law. He does not care about the law in the slightest. His only concern is raising his profile and, more importantly, I think, signaling his allegiance during the cold Civil War. And I think that's what we're seeing, as you point out, is how much of the system still works. You know, Yarvin has put it this way: the Trump administration is attempting to run the government like the government still works, and they're doing the best job anyone has done at that. And we're about to find out if the old girl can actually turn over the engine. You know, like that's kind of where we're at. Is you know, JD Vance and Elon Musk and Donald Trump they've cleaned up everything. They replaced the spark plugs. You know, they've redone the wiring. And now we're going to turn the key and see if this baby can actually run anymore. And if the answer is no, then we all have to answer much harder questions. But I'll say this: God bless them for trying this. And I'm not saying that in a condescending way. Genuinely, God bless them for trying this, because I think that's what people need to see. I think that's the only thing that's going to make people aware of kind of where we are as a country, when they watch someone who was literally shot trying to get elected, operate in the country in the constitutional manner in which it was meant to operate, and then things still don't move or change. Well, then we kind of know what's up. And if they do move and change, then awesome. There was still something left in the tank. We can still re-inhabit it, you know, those narratives, because I still think that despite the system being as broken as it is, there is still some narrative power left in the Constitution, in the American dream, in the way of life. I think sometimes guys like Curtis Yarvin oversell how dead that is. I think there is still a lot of animating, you know, vigor in those, if you can access them. And so if it can work at all, I feel like the Trump administration is giving it the best try we're going to see. And if it can't, then this will kind of show, I think, for most people, that this system is simply not going to be salvaged in its current incarnation.
Yeah, it's a religion, or it's a moral view. The Constitution and sort of the belief in what America is supposed to be. And it matters to the people to whom it matters. And the issue is, you want to make sure those people are actually in charge and in a position to make those calls, which, you know, the paradox or the difficulty there is that you're having to act against what has been procedurally decided that America is, sort of the Pharisaical notion of what the rule of law is. And the person who wants to get people who actually care about America back in charge so that civic religion can be alive again, is facing these procedural forces that are, you know, to some extent an outgrowth of or a corruption of those original beliefs. So it's complicated, but yeah, you want them to win. Of course you want them to win. And I guess I would say, like, whether or not they figure it out, the right thing for us to do on the ground is to organize and to create deep, you know, illegible bonds with other people, and build things that are not dependent on the power structure that's opposing all this. And that, I mean, because, you know, if we win and we make America great again, like, then it will be good for you to have built these connections and created things that are robust and that will be part of the new order. That's good. But if not, like, you're going to need these things. And so, like, I see it as, like, for us individually, you know, you hope it goes one way, but you don't need it to go that way.
Do you find it strange that the most radical insight for a lot of people politically in the last, you know, few years is that religion still matters? It's the way of being that has really defined humanity throughout its entire existence. And yet, for some reason, I feel like the entire neo-reactionary discussion was, like, there's plenty of insights there, but the major one was just like, yeah, no, everything's still a religion, guys. Like, that's actually still, which came from two atheists, like the two biggest thinkers in knee reaction. And yet that really is the most important insight. And you would expect this pattern of being that is so intrinsic to human flourishing to show itself everywhere, because people get touchy when you talk about the civic religion, right? Because they're like, oh, that's crass, that's that don't be a heretic, you're trying to, but ultimately what you're just saying is the pattern of human existence that is activated by religious belief and is animated by religious belief ultimately is also present in other aspects of our existence. Like, why would you expect religion to stop just at the divine? Though, while that's the most important manifestation of religion, why would you expect humans not to pattern their understanding of life and government and everything else around this thing that defined human existence for centuries? It's just kind of funny to me that at this moment, the deepest insight you can really bring, and people forget it, they learn it for 10 seconds. Wokeness is a religion. Oh, okay. So what are we going to do to combat it? We're going to be as rational as possible. Oh, wrong lesson, buddy. Wrong lesson. But we just keep going back to it somehow.
Yeah, and I think, maybe you needed atheists to, as someone who's of sincere faith myself, I don't like to think of religion in its character as like a social technology that has utility.
Right.
Because that's the fact that it has utility doesn't matter to me. What matters is that it's true.
Which is why it has utility, but yeah.
Well, right, exactly. It doesn't work the other way. Like if you try to use it as a tool, it breaks on you. But yeah, it's really just like, I think there's a separation that people want to exist between the divine, the spiritual, and this life. And like it's like religion is too holy and too sacred to like sully with real life. And it's like, no, your beliefs about who you are and where you come from and what you're here to do, how could that not color your politics? How could that not change the way you think people should interact and the way you think they should be governed? Like, of course it changes it. And yeah, like the American system of government is predicated on all sorts of beliefs about what human beings are that are fundamentally religious questions. And not everyone who believes in those precepts is Christian, but those precepts come from Christianity,
right? And
they don't exist in non-Christian countries. I think it's remarkable how much you learn from traveling about like how weird you are for caring about like the rule of law and honesty and equality in the particular way that you do. Like that is Christian. It's a particular thing. It doesn't exist in China. It doesn't exist in India. It doesn't exist, in sub-Saharan Africa. And yeah, like why wouldn't it permeate every part of your life? And yeah, that comes down to like, who is an American, right? It's not just a set of ideas, but it contains a set of ideas. Like the ideas matter a great deal to what it means to be an American.
Not that there is no proposition. It's just that proposition came from somewhere. It's not some a priori thing that we all agreed on before we started the civilization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Kevin, one more question before we wrap this up. You're the leader of the Exit Group. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, as you pointed out, while we are getting a nice breather, while we are getting an opportunity to build, while the fact that guys like Chris Rufo are making space and guys like Donald Trump are making space for us is positive, ultimately, we can't rely on this. Ultimately, the system is too rotten throughout to expect that each one of these guys is going to be able to just fix the whole thing top to bottom. And so that then leaves it to us to figure out, what are we going to do? Like now, how shall we live? And so my question for you is, obviously you can't give away the whole farm. People got to check out Exit, but just a little basic, what should people be doing right now? I know smaller communities seem to be part of this. What should people be doing so that they can make sure that if the next bad guy gets elected, or if Trump isn't able to secure his imperial reign for the next 1,000 years on the Golden Throne, Like what should they be doing to prepare themselves in case the government decides that they're not going to be giving us space anymore?
Yeah, so I think one of the consequences of Brazilification is that the political is going to become intensely personal, and has become intensely personal. Like what happens to you in the event that you're the victim of a crime or the perpetrator of a crime very much depends on just who the judge is and what they think of you. And that is, in terms of like your economics, how you make a living. A lot is going to depend less on procedure, and it's going to depend more on like who you know. And as I put it in the post on blog.exitgroup.us, Mediterranean times call for Mediterranean business norms. You need to start hiring your friends. You need to start building things with your friends. You need to start living with your friends. You need to treat your friends like friends, and favor them and build patronage. And that's sort of the objective of what I'm doing, is making sure that I have that I'm useful to useful people. And that's what I think everybody should be doing, is building those networks, doing cool things together, learning cool things together, and becoming a people, because you're going to need people.
And you should recognize that people are going to hate this. I know the guys at Ridge Runner up in Tennessee are facing a lot of this problem right now as they try to build an intentional community up there. They've got all these, local reporters who are sad little men desperately trying to raise their profile by screaming Nazi as loud as they can. And so, it's not just about that building, which I think is absolutely critical, but it's also about recognizing that you're forming that network that's going to be able to withstand those moments. These guys who are forging this community together, their wives are supporting each other. They're meeting together. This is a situation in which they recognize that if they don't have each other's back, this is not going to work. Exactly. And so, like you said, it's not just about building is important, but it's also about having that community, having that backing, knowing at the end of the day that once you have entered into this project, the people around you are going to stand alongside you, because you are going to have the system pushing back. Like you said, the political is getting extremely personal, and the system is not going to like to see people making the decisions that allow them to concentrate, have that shared community, have that shared vision, have that support, break away from relying on others that don't agree with them or who would be hostile to them. That's not all going to just happen because you decide to move somewhere. So recognize that it's both. You have to integrate both of those sides into this strategy of finding a way together to build a community that's going to be able to stand apart should it need to.
Yeah, I mean, there is no Shire. What drove the piece that I wrote this week was reflecting on my travels. I get on a plane once a month, and I've been doing that for about 3 years. So I've been to basically every major city and a lot of really small cities. And there isn't a place where the kids aren't on tablets watching weird porn. And there isn't a place where, there's not migrants at Home Depot. It's everywhere in the country. They don't have exactly all of the same pathologies, but there's nowhere that doesn't have these modern pathologies. And so if it's sort of, if you want the Shire, you gotta scour it first. Like you're gonna have to build something, and you're gonna need to. That starts with the people that you build it with, and that's been my approach is to think about this not in terms of jurisdiction, not in terms of geography, but in terms of who are the people that I want in the foxhole with me.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think everybody needs to recognize in this moment. You need to be thinking about, who do I want to be next to? Who do I want that foxhole with me? If I have to make the call tomorrow, can I get 5 guys to protect my house? If I need to make the call tomorrow, can I get a buddy a job when he just lost it? If there's a emergency tomorrow with my family, do I know that people will step up and be come alongside me? That's the most critical question for people heading into this. So.
Yeah, and there's a joke in the like network state sphere that's like, yes, I'm going to create my own sovereign, clade, autonomous, whatever, and it's like a guy who can't start a dinner party, right? Like, so like, that's where I think it starts. Is have a monthly night out, go get drinks, go get dinner, become an institution at that scale. And I think that is the kernel of, and then you talk about like, well, what do we want to do? Maybe it's like road cleanup. I know a guy who basically started with like a couple of guys who had some trade skills, and he was like, can we help fix up some old lady's house? And they used that to learn like who was credible, who knew their stuff, who would show up. And they eventually sort of refined that into a little kind of contractor cooperative, and they ended up fixing up a building in a downtown area and turning it into a business together. And now it's kind of like they're like Tony Soprano Clubhouse. And so I guess what I would say is like, think about the big picture, but it starts with dinner parties and little odd jobs around the house and just being neighborly.
Excellent. Well, we have a few questions from the audience. So before we get to those, Kevin, where should people look for Exit and the rest of your work?
Yeah, exitgroup.us. The newsletter is blog.exitgroup.us. And if you subscribe, you get access to our cocktail hours, which we've got 2 coming up in the next couple of weeks in Dallas and Austin. So yeah, exitgroup.us. All
right, everybody should be checking that out. Let's head over to our questions. Vegas77 says, the gated 55 and up communities around me create false reality for the boomers that live there. They have a nice loophole. Meanwhile, young families have to fight for a place in diversity. Thunderdome. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what somebody had the most incredible post a while back, which is, institutions of higher learning are about getting the right opinions about diversity and making enough money to avoid the consequences. And that's very much the mentality, I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people who are at the, twilight years. They kind of felt like, well, we did our part and, we can kind of live in this bubble. We're affluent enough to where we can section ourselves off from many of the consequences. And so therefore, it's probably not that big of a problem. And they don't recognize that there's an awfully big wall of money between them and what most of the younger people who are trying to start a family are struggling against.
Yeah, it's also massively true of people who don't have kids because they have the flexibility and the mobility to fly above a lot of things where you're just less both like physically, but also like socially, you are more rooted and you can't avoid the consequences of things as much as you can if it's just you and you're just sort of thinking about your personal safety, your personal media consumption, all that. You make those choices, but when you have kids, it's very different.
Yep. And then Auron MacIntyre can't say my name, so I changed it for $5. Thank you. British Supreme Court just ruled that men aren't legally women. Glad to hear it. But what a world we live in. Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that the British Supreme Court even came up with that ruling, given everything else happening in that country at the moment. But for some reason, the British, I think they also banned transition surgeries for children before America did. So, in strange moments, despite them being insane on everything else, they do seem to run slightly ahead on the gender issue.
Weird, like there's like a really strong like TERF constituency out there. I don't know what drives that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that is a part of it, sadly, is that the irate feminist still has more power than the institutional conservative somehow. And so when they decide that something's wrong, even if it's on the transgender issue, they can actually power it through in the way that your average evangelical pastor is just unwilling to go to bat for, sadly enough. Evangelical pastors care more about your religion than a feminist cares about hers. Just gonna throw that one out there for you. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Of course, always great talking to Kevin. Make sure that you are following him on all the relevant platforms. If it's your first time stopping by here, of course, you need to go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell notification, all that stuff, so you know when we are going live. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you'd like to support the show, you can head over to shopblazemedia.com. We got plenty of merch under the Auron MacIntyre collection for you to pick up there. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.